Before April 2, 1902, there was no collective people or modern country or national identity called Kenya. The region consisted of distinct nomadic societies, chiefdoms, and states. In contrast, the area now known as Uganda had long established centralized kingdoms before colonial rule. Uganda is far older than Kenya. Its geography and control include Western Kenyan groups such as Luhyas and Western Tanzania and some part of Zambia. Along the eastern coast, Malindi and Mombasa were independent Swahili city-states with deep international trade networks centuries before the creation of Kenya. These political and economic systems predate the colonial borders that later absorbed them. Kenya emerged as a colonial administrative construct that imposed a new identity and political framework on a non-related diverse people. Independence in 1963 transferred power and history from the settled Bantu farmers into the hands of nomads, cattle-wandering tribes, and other foreigners, leaving major historical injustices, especially land dispossession, largely unresolved. And quickly history was rewritten and borders redrawn, and new unrelated societies were created to sustain the lies of a nationhood for taxation and politics. Colonial rule relied mainly on selected specific elites and specific communities, from nomads, to enforce new systems of governance and identity. This reshaped political power and land ownership, benefiting a small ruling class while marginalizing those who were speeding up industrialization and local trade. The elites were selected from tribes who used to dig holes on their earlobes or remove 2 or 4 teeth, including pastoralist and hunter-gatherer communities, while Bantu farmers were denied rights or uprooted from ancestral land and were made cheap laborers. Ethnic identities are shaped by genetics, history, culture, and shared experience. But British colonial borders forced together coastal Swahili societies, inland farming communities, pastoralist groups, foragers, and neighboring populations that had previously developed separately. This division also separated culturally related communities across borders, such as Luhya clans across Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania, weakening pre-existing identities while creating new administrative ones. British created a hybrid country where part of Mombasa, part of southern Sudanese, part of Baganda, and part of Gala were lumped into one and forced to be a single nation, disregarding who is who, their ancestral origins, or why they were there in the first place. And today you have Luhyas of Kenya, separated from Luhyas of Uganda and Tanzania, and vice versa, and lack of a singular identity in Kenya for Luhyas who clearly were reshaped by the arrival of Sudanese mercenaries and later Britain's mass transfer of Luhyas for cheap labor. Treating deeply different communities as a single nation without first addressing historical inequality risks masking injustice rather than creating unity. The name Kenya has no meaning among Luhya or tribes of Mombasa. When British arrived, had achieved their goal. Luos from Sudan and Kalenjins from Sudan, who were originally a renowned military's mercenaries, and not single tribes as we're being taught today. The two were already colonized farmers of the Great Lakes, laying ground for British to find a weaker cracks on Luhya's part of eastern Baganda, and somehow, by 1963, we were collectively called a singular nation. Yet, linguistically and genetically, nothing is common, and it is what is hurting the unreal country called Kenya. Because, example, Kikuyus have an entitlement identity which is similar to Somali and Tutsi. Kikuyus believes eastern Uganda, which is modern-day western Kenya, belongs to them and that Luhyas shouldn't be allowed to speak. Same thing you'll find among Luos, who also view Luhyas as inferior beings. Treating deeply different societies as a single nation without addressing historical inequality risks concealing injustice rather than resolving it. This raises key questions. How did independence benefit communities outside the main centers of resistance? Why were colonial land injustices preserved after 1963? And to what extent did independence reproduce colonial structures instead of replacing them? How did Kikuyus, Kalenjins fighting Britons in Gala land, birth independence and freedom of tribes of ancient Mombasa, Pokots, or self-rule of Luhyas of Uganda when these ancient kingdoms and free states were already a separate free, independent, and didn't know Kikuyus, neither did Kikuyus know Mombasa nor Baganda kingdoms? The first time for Luhya to encounter Kikuyus was between 1932 to 1945, when the late Jomo Kenyatta left Kikuyu land within Gala region only to return back to a rebranded fake country now as a prime minister, and the then head of state to a fake country with fake history. Kenyatta's mission abroad was to address FGM, yet no single Luhya has ever practiced such thing.